Hello and welcome to Conversations. I'm Robin Torres, your host, and our guest today is Mr. Walter R. Bradley. Walter is a career employee with the United States Marshal Service with over 29 years of service. Walter also served in the military. He's a retired lieutenant colonel. He was also a commissioned officer and an aviation warrant officer in the military. Thanks for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit more background about where you're from and how did you land in Kansas City?
Well, I'm born and raised in the Hudson Valley of New York State, about 100 miles north of New York City. Born in Kingston, New York, and raised in New Paltz. Graduated high school in New Paltz in 1969, so we'll give up on the age thing right away.
Okay, that's all right.
And then I went to an Ag and Tech college up by Syracuse, New York, State University of New York, Ag and Tech College at Morrisville. I got an associate's degree in natural resources conservation there. And that kind of tweaked my interest a little bit. Early on, it was maybe to be a fish and wildlife type enforcement officer at some level. So after that, I joined the military. I was assigned as a military policeman at the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. I did 3 years of active duty there. After I got out, I stayed in law enforcement. The Army kind of got me channeled into that field, which that was a goal I had anyway. Early on, it was to fly, but that didn't work out right away. But later on, that did become a career path that I was able to pursue.
Okay, because you did fly, right?
I did fly. I flew for many, many years, but that was something that I actually got into the field out here in Kansas City area.
Okay.
So
and you have a family?
I do.
Yes.
I'm married. I've got 2 grown sons. Both of the boys are down in Arizona. And I've got my youngest is 9, Kaylee. It's my granddaughter that's been with us since she was 3 months old. So we adopted her a long time ago.
Oh, great.
We live here in Tonganoxie. And I've had several assignments around the country with the Marshal Service, which we can talk about some of the things you go through as a federal employee.
Okay, so right after the military, right after retiring, you joined the U.S. Marshal Service. Now, what attracted you to the Marshal's Service?
Well, what I did was, after I got out of the military, I moved out here to Kansas City. Just because, back in that time frame, there were a lot of issues with, budgeting, finance. Kind of like times we're going through now. There were a lot of issues with the municipalities that were having to cut budgets, including like New York City Police Department back then. So I relocated to the Midwest just based on family and the way things were out here and things that I'd seen that I liked. I wasn't real committed to stay in in the smaller villages of New York.
Right.
It's nice to say you're home, but I was looking at other things and, career possibilities down the road.
Okay. So tell us about the Marshal Service with the United States government. Tell us about that entire organization.
It's got a lot of duties and responsibilities, that's for sure. It's one of the things that attracted me to it. It's not nearly as big as some of the other federal agencies. Of course, probably your biggest that's out there, numbers-wise, and as far as their duties and responsibilities might be the FBI. We're probably about the same size as DEA and ATF, with roughly 4,000 employees, across the country. But we have a lot of different fields. We support all of our federal judiciary, if you will. Any place you have a federal courthouse, you're going to have a marshal's office. We do a lot of things during the day that would be very similar to what the county sheriff would do at the county level.
Okay, so you're like the sheriff of the United States, right?
Of the federal level.
Of the federal level.
We ensure the integrity of all of your federal courthouses. We have all of the physical security of the federal courthouses. We have all of the prisoners that are being detained as pretrial detainees that have been indicted federally. So if you're not on bond or you haven't been released, you'll be in our custody, and we'll go ahead and produce you for hearings and trials every day. If there's any threats against our judicial family, our U.S. Attorney's Office, any of our prosecutors, we'll investigate those. If the necessity arises for protection details, we will do that, and we do that whenever there's a Supreme Court judge that's visiting the District of Kansas.
Okay.
The District of Kansas is basically the geographical state of Kansas. We have 3 courthouses in Kansas, one in Kansas City, one in Topeka, and one in Wichita. So our headquarters is here in Kansas City, and we have the Topeka and the Wichita sub-offices.
Okay.
Another major part of our day-to-day operations would be fugitive investigations, to include the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act.
What was your first assignment as a U.S. Marshal?
My first assignment, I joined the agency. Basically, I was out here and working for Shawnee Police Department in Johnson County. I started looking at opportunities down the road where I wasn't constantly working shift work, and what was the possibilities for me down the road is long term. But my first assignment after I was offered employment with the Marshals was Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
So we packed up and moved. I went to Brooklyn. I was there in Brooklyn for 3 years, doing general operations work as a deputy. And then I proceeded to work for a year in Manhattan in the Southern District of New York in the Witness Protection Division.
Okay, and you can't really touch on that one. So, and I know they have different divisions broken up into the agency itself,
Mm-hmm.
and you worked with several of those different divisions.
Right.
What other division can you speak on?
Your general day-to-day operations would be your court operations and your prisoner security, trial productions,
Okay.
And any investigative efforts you have revolving around threats and prisoner transportation. If we have to move people between jails, for those trial productions, like here in Kansas City, we have CCA Leavenworth, which we manage that contract. So that's where we detain all our folks that are pretrial detainees.
Okay, so the Federal Marshal's Office is the one that picks them up and
Picks them
gets
up,
them
moves
to
them.
court.
You bet. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's just part of our day-to-day court productions, if you will. Fugitives is a big operation for us here in Kansas. We have a fugitive task force composed of our deputies and state and local officers in all 3 of our court cities.
Okay.
Last year we arrested over 1,200 people that were in active fugitive status. The year before that we were just over 1,100, so we did have a little bit of an increase, even with the a couple of shortages that I haven't been able to fill in the office.
Okay.
Fugitives is a fun part of the job for the guys because that's the Tommy Lee Jones,
right.
Let's get out and catch the bad guys. And
we're going to talk about that when we come back from break, because I do want to find out more about the fugitive operations. And we'll be back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We'll be back in just a moment with Walter Bradley.
Okay.
Target search of every warehouse, farmhouse, and doghouse in that area. The fugitive just cashed in his, and all he had to do was
rollovers and protecting your foot is safe.
You can't.
My husband taught me to know tomorrow. European vacations of cars. Life was till he died. Our no tomorrows. They're all I've got.
Over an organ transplant and die before they get one. Increase your chances of organ donation. Buyers. Used to the organs of other members, you give fellow members organs. Anyone can join. Members now. It's save your life.
Hi, and welcome back to Conversations. We're here with Walter Bradley of the U.S. Marshal Service, and we ended the last segment with talking about the fugitive operations, and I want to get more into that because how do you get leads on whether someone is a fugitive or not?
Well, you've probably got 3 ways,
Okay.
3 major ways. Of course, anything that's initiated in our district, violations of any kind of conditions of release or any kind of a federal prison escapee, either from our contract jails or from, let's say, Leavenworth Prison or anywhere else we investigate, we'll generate all of those issues here in our own house because it's a local issue, if you will. We can get into the court records, we can get into their background, we can get into family and where they might have a source of support, be it identification, transportation, money, a place to hide, or somebody to move them. We get a lot of leads from other districts. We may get a lead from the District of Colorado out of Denver that says we think we've got a guy located in Wichita, Kansas, or we need you to investigate family in Wichita to see if they know anything. We could get a lead from Seattle. It's it could be anywhere in the country, any one of the 94 judicial districts.
What is that investigative process like when you have to call a family member to see if a fugitive is staying with them or if they're harboring that fugitive? What is that investigative process like?
Most of the time it's going to be a face-to-face appearance, because
Okay.
we can sit there and we can talk about it just like you and I talk now. Like, you may be completely ignorant of what's going on, so I can explain to you what we're doing. I can explain to you why we're there.
Okay.
And I can explain to you what the pitfalls would be if somebody were to show up and you agreed to help them out.
Okay.
Because that's a violation of law too.
And I could go to prison.
Absolutely, and
Oh.
it gives us an idea of of whether somebody might be there. If we drive up and all of a sudden there's the car with the license plate from Denver that they said he was driving, well, then we take a whole nother approach to how we're going to deal with that house and the occupants of that house.
Now,
so
is it
it's-
broken into, the doors down, and you're running in with your guns and everything?
We
or is it
prefer
a-
not.
Is it a peaceful?
Excuse me. We prefer not to do that because
Okay.
it really elevates your risk to the individuals, because you're stepping into an arena where you may not know the floor plan, you may not know the attitude of the folks that are in there,
Okay.
you may not know where they are in the house or how many of them there are. If I can work it another ways through a more toned down contact with the individual to get them to come out, the arrest will be made.
Right.
The question is, what steps will we go to get that done? We're not going to let you go, off into another district or something, and we have to chase you again.
Okay. How many usually go to the face-to-face contact? Are there? I'm sure there's more than one.
Oh yeah, there's going to be more than one, just in case that that the target of the investigation is there, and depending on where our investigation leads us to that day, we'll go ahead and we'll set up a team depending on the needs. If we have to do front door, back door, if we have to surround the property, if we're going to be looking at multiple apartments in a complex, or if we're just going to be walking through the parking lots identifying vehicles, or it just depends on what the investigative lead gives us.
Okay. Once you apprehend the fugitive, bring them back to the district that they need to be prosecuted in. What happens to them then? They go back to prison.
They'll go back into the court system, if you will. If it's a state case, because we do a lot of that with Department of Corrections and with our county sheriff and city partners. We'll get a lead. Somebody might want somebody in a county in another state. And if they're going to extradite them, we'll investigate it. If we find them, it falls back on the jurisdiction that's looking for them. So if it's a state or a county, they'll be looking for a governor's warrant to extradite them back. If it's federal, we'll just go ahead with the local federal courthouse. We'll have a removal hearing. They'll be ordered back to the district that's looking for them, and we'll move them back in the federal channels, if you will. Once they go back, they'll go back into the system in whatever stage they were in before. If it was pre-trial, the system will move ahead to either a trial or a guilty plea or some other disposition. If they're an escapee, they'll go back and they'll finish their time on their original sentence.
Now, we were talking during the break about sex offenders and not registering, but then trying to escape, or not escape, but move to another state or district. What happens when they don't register as a sex offender?
The Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act was signed into law in the year 2006, and it mandates that the United States Marshal Service do investigations of convicted sex offenders who are required to register in the jurisdiction where they were convicted. And a lot of times folks will move and they will not register. They won't tell their supervising officers that they're going to leave the jurisdiction. They'll end up in some other jurisdiction. They may even try to change their identities to avoid the issues that they have at hand. Moving now and relocating to another jurisdiction is now a federal offense.
Okay.
Whereas before it was up to the state that was supervising you to decide how to handle that, to investigate it, to bring you back. Now, if they ask us to get involved, and that's another way we can generate cases, because we'll do what we call compliance operations. We will actually fund county, state officers to go out and make sure these people are actually living where they're registered to live and working where they're supposed to be working. So it gives us a heads up if they've actually moved on to another jurisdiction. We open up a case on that. We take it to the U.S. Attorney. Once they're apprehended, it now becomes a federal violation in the federal courts.
Okay. So you have the power to go get them and bring them back?
We can go get them and bring them back, and we don't have to worry about if the state can do it, because now it's purely a federal violation.
Wow.
If the state has an interest, we'll just let the prosecutors work that out. But if it's just a matter of who's going to prosecute them, we'll open the case. We'll go ahead. We'll do the investigation. We'll make the arrest. If they're arrested in some other jurisdiction, they'll stay there, and the federal process will start.
Okay. Okay. Most people, I guess, have seen the movie, The Fugitive. I couldn't get it out. The Fugitive. U.S. Marshals and Fugitives. Is that movie anywhere similar or close to the actual operations of the U.S. Marshals Office right now?
The concept behind the movie of, there's a wanted person who's wanted in the federal court system is very, very real, and that's an everyday occurrence in every district. So the basic premise of the movie is very much true.
It's
of course,
much true.
It's condensed down for 2 hours for TV,
right?
And Tommy Lee makes a hell of a lot more money
yes.
than we all do, But the idea that you're actually out there, pursuing these individuals
right.
and following leads wherever they may go. If you're a Kansas fugitive and you end up in Florida, that doesn't mean we're not going to look.
Okay.
We have jurisdiction all over. I'll send leads to Florida. I can send my investigators to Florida if I need be.
Okay.
But the concept is very, very much real. We do work multi-jurisdictional issues, if you will, with state, local, county, city, and other federal agencies. We work all the DEA fugitives. We work a lot of ATF fugitives. And it's a smart way to do business because, we're chasing the fugitives. Their agents are out working new investigations. So, we're not stepping on each other's toes. They know, when we catch one of their people because we notify them right away. U.S. Attorney's Office is brought on board right away, and the system moves on.
And the technology has made it a lot easier, hasn't it?
There's an awful lot of technology out there. There's an awful lot of investigative tools. There's an awful lot of computer databases. And of course, there's every time something new comes out, you'll get a new court decision to regulate how some of those things are doing, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
We just had the Supreme Court decision come out on tracking devices, on installing tracking devices on cars now, where you need a search warrant.
Right.
Before you didn't need that.
Okay.
If a car was parked in Walmart parking lot and I wanted to slip a tracking device underneath of it, search warrant was not required.
Okay.
Well, just very recently, there was
now
a Supreme Court decision because of privacy issues and that and the other things that the lawyers argued. I believe it was a unanimous decision that search warrants are required.
Okay.
So we have to comply with that. And there's a lot of database information out there. There's a lot of financial information. There's a lot of things that come in. My third method that I was going to say before for generating leads, like the TIPS hotline.
Well,
I bet you we get calls every day, through our state and local partners on from TIPS hotline, to generate leads, and we'll follow up on those.
Wow.
If we get one, we're going to go with it. We'll go with it the next day, or depending on the urgency of what we're looking at.
Okay. We're going to finish that up when we come back. We're going to take another break.
You bet.
And we'll be right back with Walter Bradley of the U.S. Marshals Service in just a moment.
There's a saying, do what you love what you do. At Kansas City, Kansas Community College Technical Education Center, you can choose from 20 technical programs, affordable programs designed to prepare you for high-demand jobs. You can be prepared for the job you love in 1 year or less. Visit us online at kckcc.edu or call today about the wide variety of technical education programs offered at the Technical Education Center at 2220 North 59th Street, phone 627-4100.
Back to Conversations. I'm Robin Torres, and we're here with Walter Bradley of the U.S. Marshals Service. And I want to back up and talk about the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to require a search warrant for the tracking devices. How long does it take now to get the warrant for that?
If you've got your arguments all put together for what why you need it, you would be able to get that in a day.
Okay.
You'd take it to your prosecutor or somebody else. They would look it over to look at the arguments you're making and make sure you've got sound justification. That's all part of our checks and balances, if you will, in the judicial system, where I just can't go out and do what I want,
right.
Any more than I can walk in and just kick your front door because I think you might have something on the table.
Okay.
It doesn't work that way. You see a lot of that on TV, but it just doesn't work that way in reality.
Okay.
So, and then we'll take it to a judge. They'll issue it. or they'll, they may very well deny it too, depending on the strength of your arguments.
Okay.
So.
Well, let's talk about the judicial or justice prisoner and alien transportation system, and you called it earlier something else.
Well, if you look at the movie that was out there, Con Air.
Yes.
Well, Con Air is real. It's just not called Con Air.
Okay.
But they did have a TV movie about that too.
Okay.
And that was kind of wild, and with the airplane crashing down the main drag in Las Vegas and all.
Okay.
But
that's real. I mean, they're real officers that transport prisoners.
Yeah, the Justice Prisoner Alien Transportation System, JPATS, if you will.
JPATS, okay.
That's the real deal. It's
okay.
It's several airplanes. They're based out of Oklahoma City.
Okay. And
all they do is move people that are in custody. Originally, many years ago, it was a Marshal Service operation only, and they would fly specific routes around the country. The coordination center, the nuts and bolts, if you will, of the management team is here in Kansas City. The airplanes are at Will Rogers Airport, I believe, in Oklahoma.
Okay.
But after a while, it was combined with Bureau of Prisons because they do massive amounts of movements between BOP facilities and immigration, Bureau of Prisons.
Okay.
So if they're moving folks around the country, it's going to be the same thing. They'll either move them by bus or they'll put them on the airplanes. But those planes
They'll put that many prisoners on an airplane?
Oh, it runs constantly.
Oh.
The airplanes are running routes constantly, and they'll go through certain major hubs, if you will, and facilities from all over the area will show up at that hub, and they'll just do their prisoner swaps right there on the airport. We used to do it at Phoenix. Phoenix was a major hub. Back in Pennsylvania, we had Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. When I was back in New York, now they go, I think, to Newburgh, Stewart Field,
okay.
And they'll set off a part of the airfield where they can secure it. And people that are going to be moved into the local area, they could be moved between BOP facilities. They could be coming back for more trials and hearings. They'll go to wherever destination they've got, and people get back on the plane that may have to end up in California. So
wow.
It's much more efficient. It's much quicker than the old days of moving people all over by car.
Right.
And we don't have to use commercial air anymore.
Okay.
So at the federal level, the old days of walking through an airport with a guy in handcuffs with the jacket over his handcuffs to hide him, and three guys in the back of the airplane, those days are over.
Okay.
We can do it if we need to, if we have to have somebody moved by tomorrow morning for trial for, real exigent circumstances. But for the most part, you're not going to see federal authorities having any exposure at the airports anymore.
Wow, I didn't know that. Tactical operations.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. We have a special operations group, which is the guys that do tactical type operations, or if you need to put 100 people in the field for something that maybe Department of Justice needs, or a local operation in a local area for whatever. And we have guys that we train at the local level for tactical type operations, and most of that would revolve around what we would consider maybe a high risk arrest scenario, or something that may escalate where we don't want to do it with two guys, at the front door, and if something develops, we always have the option to pull out and then turn it into a tactical operation. We can do it. We also depend a lot on our state and local partners. If we're out there and all of a sudden something does escalate, we have no hesitation whatsoever. We'll call the city police. We'll call the county sheriff. We'll call the Kansas Highway Patrol. They all have excellent tactical operations. They've got the equipment. They got the people, and we work very well with them.
Okay.
So we have almost instantaneous access if we need it at several levels.
At several levels. Wow. Now, where are you now located in the service, in the Marshal Service? What's your job now?
Okay, my career has taken me through all the different divisions we've talked about, with
right.
the exception of asset forfeiture.
Okay.
Now,
asset forfeiture. Could you explain that a little bit?
You bet. The asset forfeiture laws were put in place years ago, basically to seize assets that are funded or purchased or secured through criminal activity.
Okay.
So the idea of how to launder money, and how to buy properties, and how to buy stocks and bonds and jewelry and gold and cars and whatever else it may be. Those assets, if it's proven that those financial arrangements were made through criminal enterprise,
then they're seized.
Then those assets are seized. They'll be managed, they'll be maintained, and once they're forfeited over to the government, for disposition, then we'll sell it. So a lot of times it'll be properties. We'll maintain the property until it's disposed of, and we'll do that through a local realtor. If it's stocks and bonds, we have experts that deal with that. If it's jewelry, we have people that deal with that as an expertise. If it's financial instruments, the same thing. So cars will auction off. We have auctions routinely in the local jurisdictions to handle cars. Okay. Something very, very, very high priced, like a real classic collector's item, we'll bring in the big guns that know what all that stuff is really worth. So it's not a,
that's a big division, then.
It is. It's a big money maker for the government. I mean, it's all done through the federal courts. Mm-hmm. It's a very long process before an asset is actually seized, maintained, and then finally disposed of after it's turned over to the government.
Now, before it's seized, is it frozen at any kind of way, or like you would hear someone's bank account has been frozen? Is that the federal government?
Those things can be done, but depending on the asset that you've got, depending on the nature of the case, what the lawyers all agree to, and in some consideration how fast it could be hidden or disposed of. Okay. There are different ways to deal with it, but in the event of like if it's rental property, we may just leave it. We'll seize it in place so it can't be disposed of. Okay. So somebody can't run out and make a fast deal, or they can't deed it over to somebody else. So it's it's locked.
It's locked.
The question is, what mechanism do you use to get there?
Okay. So. Well, this has been fascinating and interesting. I didn't know a whole lot about the Marshal Service. So now, how long do you plan to stay with them?
I'm I'm in an appointed position now, so I'm happy with what I'm doing. I got a couple of vacancies I'd like to fill, so we could do a couple other things. But I've been through many offices around the country. New York, I did the headquarters thing. I did a tour at our headquarters in Washington, D.C. Phoenix, Arizona, doing fugitives for 5 years. That was probably the most fun.
Okay.
You get to dress down. You get to go out and, and hook up the bad guy. Right. And, you talk about, some impact on justice. But a bigger one is community impact. Okay. And when you can tell people what we actually do, because that's the stuff you're going to see.
Right.
Nobody sees what happens, when you're day to day to day in a 10-month trial. Mm-hmm. Nobody ever understands that until the verdict comes out, and all of a sudden it's nobody knows what it takes to get there, between the judges, the courts, the pretrial services, the U.S. Attorney's offices, witnesses. It's a massive operation to keep all of that going, and everybody on the same track. But for us, the fugitive issue is, once we get them back in the courtroom, we're pretty much done with it.
We're done with it.
I didn't deal with the underlying case. That's a DEA or an ATF or a county prosecutor issue. I just go out and find the guy who's not in compliance with his court-ordered provisions. Okay. If they make the effort to go underground, we make the effort to go find them.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today and informing us on the U.S. Marshal Service. I didn't know a lot of this. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
And you're welcome anytime.
Appreciate you having me out here.
Come back anytime.
Yep.
And thank you for joining us this episode on Conversations, and we'll see you next time.